Sexual. It was all about sex, Kyle said seriously. I invited her to my room to have sex with me. I've already told you that, but I left out a big piece of that story. When she got there, I sensed that this was not a normal thing for her, but I liked her. I really liked her, and honestly, I was going to just talk to her and let her move at her own pace, even if it meant I had to wait a few days, or weeks, or whatever. That right there should have told me I was in trouble, because I didn't roll like that. We either got busy, or you could bounce, because I could replace you with a phone call. See, Pastor Arum, I never cared about the women I messed around with, and I definitely didn't care what they thought of me. Kyle shrugged with that last statement and looked like he was speaking of someone other than himself. He stared the pastor in the eye and added, they could love me, hate me, and everything in between. It mattered not to Kyle Brewster, because little did they know, their round-trip ticket was already booked when I said hello. I discovered early on that was the only way to keep them at bay. Women have always fallen hard for me without even knowing me, Kyle explained, sounding truly perplexed. I guess that's because of the way I look, but damn. Kyle looked up and asked Pastor Arum to excuse him for cursing and continued. I've had women tell me they love me within 24 hours of meeting me. But Joice, I wanted her. Pastor Arum was silent. Kyle knew he had to be somewhat taken aback by what he was hearing. This was, after all, his goddaughter. That's what Kyle loved about his mentor. He could tell him anything, and he trusted him to never tell a soul. So we talked for a long time, about nothing really, but that's when I realized she had no idea what she was doing. Kyle hesitated. For some reason, he had to get this out, although for the life of him, he did not know why. He took a deep breath and went on. She actually thought it was normal for her to be sitting there talking to me about her job and the other projects she's been on, like it was some kind of first date. He shook his head no. That's not how it goes out there, he declared. Unless you're in a real relationship with somebody, you just go to their room, have sex, and leave. You may fall asleep and wake up and get some more, but you definitely leave after that. There's not a whole lot of socializing, but Joice was a fish out of water, and normally I would have lost my patience with her, but for some reason I couldn't. So after a good hour or more of just straight up chatting, she stood and asked me if she should undress. Kyle looked sheepish, and Pastor Arum could tell he was choosing his next words very carefully. He cleared his throat and continued. I told her she didn't have to and that I liked talking to her, and maybe we can get together again soon. I've been very honest with you, Pastor Arum, because I trust you. The only person that knew me more intimately than you do was Joice. Pastor Arum understood that was a preface for whatever he was about to hear, but he was curious as to why Kyle chose this time to tell him all of this. He nodded for him to continue. At that moment, I didn't want to do it, and that's the truth, Kyle confessed passionately. I wanted to tell her I enjoyed her company and that we could see each other again soon, even the next day if she wanted. I didn't voice this to her, but I really didn't think it was a good idea for us to have sex that night. Something about her made me, hesitant. Well, she said she wanted to, Kyle said, and looked down. He bit his bottom lip and added, but this is the other thing I want to tell you, and it's really hard for me, so please just bear with me. After a long silence, Kyle swallowed hard and began. We got busy and something happened to me. After about an hour of foreplay, we started, but when I entered her, I got emotional. Really emotional. When my body joined her body that way, something happened. It's like I was overwhelmed or something. Kyle was probably not aware that he was whispering now. I did what I had to do, but when I had an orgasm, I cried. I could not control it, Pastor Arum. It wasn't like I wiped my eyes because I was a little teary. I cried like somebody had died, but I wasn't sad. I think I was happy. I honestly don't know what was wrong with me, but the really bizarre part was the way she reacted. I was so embarrassed. All I wanted to do was leave. Well, I didn't really want her to leave. It was more like I wanted to disappear. But Joice, she held me in her arms and started whispering a prayer. I'm sure it was a prayer. And then she started singing that song about surrendering everything to Jesus. Her voice was so soft and so sweet. The more she sang, the harder I cried. But none of it seemed abnormal or strange to her. Most women have hightailed it out of there thinking I was some kind of weirdo, but she acted like this was something that happened every day and she just knew what to do. Well, when I finally composed myself, I started pouring my heart out to her, telling her that I wasn't a good person. I told her things I had not allowed myself to think about, more or less tell someone else. When she left in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep. I was up all night and decided I didn't like the way she made me feel, and I was going to try to leave her alone. She made me feel guilty or something. I know I'm not on the same spiritual level as you and her, but I know whatever happened to me that night was directly related to Joice. Pastor Arum folded his arms and looked at Kyle. In all of his years as pastor, he had not come across any relationship that was so wrong. I agree, son, he said, shaking his head, and I would wager that you had yielded to this hesitation and insisted she leave instead of having sex with her. Things would have gone differently for you both. Joice knew exactly what was wrong with you, and she would no more have left you in that state than she would have Prue or Autumn. She realized you were hurting and that her mission with you was spiritual, the same way it was with Task. But she had messed up so badly, all she could do was pray for you and try to comfort you. When you stopped her in the PX, she should have given you what thus said the Lord and then referred you to one of the brothers out there, or she could have even called me. But she allowed her feelings to get involved, and instead of ministering to you as she should have, she yielded to the desires of her flesh and got caught up in an extremely inappropriate relationship with you. There's that phrase again Kyle silently mussed when Pastor Arum said he and Joice got caught up. She felt responsible for you, Kyle. She kept asking God to take care of you and to forgive her for aiding you in going against his will. Kyle, you're familiar with the story of David and Bathsheba in the Bible, right? Pastor Arum asked as they were finishing up the second impromptu session. Kyle nodded yes, but said it had been a while since he read it. Okay, a quick refresher, the pastor said and smiled. Bathsheba was still married to Uriah when she became pregnant with David's child as a result of an adulterous tryst with him. Uriah was a soldier and was fighting in the war. David sent for him and tried to trick him into sleeping with his wife so he would think the child she was carrying was his own. When that didn't work, David tried to get Uriah drunk, then get him to sleep with Bathsheba, but to no avail. Finally, David told his army captain, Joab, to put Uriah on the front line of the battle so he would be killed, and so it was. What Joice did to you and Candy was the equivalent of what David did to Bathsheba's husband, Uriah. In this case, Joice represents David because she was the powerful one in that she had the word of God in a way that you and your wife did not. You and Candy combined were no match for Joice spiritually. At some point, she decided to put your marriage on the front line. Really, Kyle, she put your wife on the front line. Candy was in her way and was keeping her from fully having the one thing she wanted more than anything else. You. She. Kyle stood abruptly and said, Pastor Arum, I've never disagreed with you before, even when it was painful. But I have to say that what you just described doesn't fit Joice at all. She wasn't like that. She didn't even like for me to talk. Pastor Arum cut him off. I've given you the word of God, Kyle, and I believe by the pastoral and teaching gifts God has anointed me with, I have rightly divided it. Please tell me what you disagree with. Kyle sighed and shook his head. The part about her putting Candy on the front line. Joice wasn't like that. She was the sweetest. David was not like that either, the pastor interrupted. You've read the Psalms. He was as tender-hearted and humble as anyone can be. But the human will is a ravenous beast, Kyle, and left to its own devices, will devour anyone or anything in its way. That wasn't her. She would never do anything like that, Kyle shouted. But I have a question. What is it? That just because I married the wrong person, I have to be unhappy the rest of my life? Why? Just to ensure she's happy? Do I get to be happy? Do I ever get to be happy? He roared. Or is it the particular emotion reserved for injured parties only, even though a great part of their injuries is self-inflicted? Candy knows, Pastor Arum. She has always known that I'm not in love with her, but she held on, and I let her hold on because we had kids and I felt obligated. But why is it that I have to? What? Die? Just to make sure she's happy? Kyle was already out of the door when he finished that last question.